This time on Poll Hub, the years after presidential elections are always odd for pollsters, both literally and figuratively. So how did we do and how did the industry do in this odd year? We're looking at the numbers. Then the New York City Marathon ran last weekend, but a turkey trot could be in your future. We're talking running with a Marist professional and a former Poll Hub producer coming back to talk about his running skills. And finally, what is the tradition that you most dislike? I cannot believe what Americans chose as their favorite disliked tradition. We'll talk about that too. And hi everybody, welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Mary Griffith.
I am Lee Marengoff.
So we are here on the day after Election Day, and I mentioned in the open that this is these are odd years, and that is because the year after presidential election years, these even years, are both odd because they come after a 2024 or 2028, but also they're odd because there are so few elections that the political class has to pay attention to. One is the New Jersey governor, one is the Virginia governor, and one is New York City mayor. And some years they're very exciting, and other years they're not. This year, all three got a lot of attention, and for very good reason. But it's also a time, the day after an election, when pollsters get to do something that we almost never get to do, which is to check our work. This is like the day the SAT scores come out, and you cautiously open it up and see how you did. So, Barb, New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey governor's races, lots of polls. We polled New York City. How did we do? How did the polling industry do? What is the grade that you'd give right now?
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Put you on the spot.
Well, it is just finished midterms here at the university, so I should be in grade mode. I actually think that the polling industry, I would say about a B plus. And the reason why I'd say a B plus is I think they provided a narrative that was pretty accurate in each of these elections. But we took the list of public polls that came out, in about the last 2 weeks, and from the Real Clear Politics average. And there are some good scientific polls in there. There's a couple of crazy polls I've never really heard of, and I was not able to find their methodology. So I think that overall that in each of these races, and I'm going to kind of put an asterisk on that one as well. But in each of these races, I think that polls did provide a good narrative. The fact that Democrats were doing well, they were doing perhaps better than expected in each of these places. We polled the New York City mayor's race. We had a 16-point margin between Mamdani and his closest competitor, Cuomo. But as when we released last week, we pointed out that there may be some strategic voting going on. What was interesting is that we saw Mamdani hovering around 50% in our poll and 50% kind of scattered against Mamdani. And I think that was a lot of the story behind the New York City race. What we found over the weekend in this particular race was President Trump got in the middle of this too, suggesting that his supporters move from the Republican candidate Sliwa and vote more strategically for former governor, Democratic governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, which is kind of a tough sell for Republicans in New York. But the comparison was between Cuomo and Mamdani, and Trump suggested that Cuomo would be the better choice. But perhaps a little too late, I should say. And Mamdani did score 50.4 percentage points of the vote, of a record vote, which we can talk about. And the margin was smaller, but so was the Republican candidate's margin as well. I think the asterisk is probably in the New Jersey race. Each of the polls indicated that this would be a somewhat closer race than it was. Two polls, the Fox News poll and the Quinnipiac poll, had the margin as +7, which I think was more realistic in characterizing the race. Both of those polls use serious scientific methodology, so it's not surprising that they were the closest. But Mikie Sherrill, I think, did surprise, and New Jerseyans surprised. She garnered a +13 over her Republican opponent. And when we were looking at New Jersey and each of the county results, I think it was quite surprising to see how many counties had turned blue. not just from 2024, but what we had seen historically. And then finally, I think in Virginia, that was a much better run. I think the polls characterized that quite well in terms of that being a double-digit race. So overall, I say B plus, not necessarily nailing the margins exactly, but definitely providing an accurate narrative and story of what this election was about.
Well, Barb, you're in the era of grade inflation. I was going to put an E on it, which is close to B plus, admittedly. And I'm not known for necessarily being a tough grader. I think our roles are being reversed there a little bit. And I'll tell you why. I think we do very well as an industry right now for the scientific, serious polls and providing transparency. There are so many different methods that are being used right now. It's very important that you, at least for the community as a whole and for the public who wants to know, how you go about getting the poll done now, because that's become, so I think it's very good on that. We will not see stories that the polls were wrong, which is always, it's been a black eye at different elections. I think that this is good not to have. But I think that has to do more with what we jokingly call sometimes the editorial margin of error. Is the candidate you have ahead in your poll end up winning? If you have a candidate ahead in your poll, let's say, but by 2 points and they lose by 1, that becomes a polls are wrong story. The gap in some of these polls, although the narrative was decent in what we did in New York City, and I think the numbers were pretty reasonable in Virginia, I think New Jersey was a big surprise. I mean, Donald Trump lost New Jersey by single digits, 6 or 7 points in the presidential. To have a double the spread for the Democrats. I mean, you're not hearing today about how New Jersey is a purple state and no longer a blue state. It's no longer being discussed as New Jersey's in play. So I think that that's part of it. And I think some of the polls, as we always say, these are snapshots. They're not necessarily predictions. And which is why I forget which organization it was, but we were reading decimal points. So the lead was 6.4. And polls are not that precise. And certainly we have a problem with the lack of precision and the margin of error anyway. But to start taking it out to a decimal point suggests a precision that is way beyond what the statistics suggest. So on the whole, I think the narratives were generally good by the serious pollsters. I think New Jersey was the exception. I agree with you on that. But I think because all the winners in the polls won on election day, you don't get the polls are wrong story. But I think there are things to look at. And I think that the turnout was very large. And I think that may have contributed to some expanding of the Democratic numbers, because I think a lot of younger people in New York City clearly voted, and I think in these other states as well. And I'm not sure. We'll have to take a look at, and some of our colleagues, whether they're, because of the recent experience with Donald Trump elections, whether they were still modeling a little bit to the Trump voter and not expecting these to be the kind of Democratic margins that we saw in terms of the turnout. So I think that's something to be watched.
Two things real quick. One is a lesson in polling, that snapshot in time. President Trump on the election morning backs Cuomo. Nobody had Sliwa at 5, 6, 7 points. He ends up with 7 points. Is that an example of the poll is only as good as the day you're out of the field, and things can change? Is that a good example of that?
Yes, and it's important from our perspective to say that there was a relationship, that Cuomo was doing better among Republicans than he was among Democrats, and that if the Sliwa numbers peeled off because they're, as Barb said, voted strategically, maybe they thought Cuomo and Mamdani were the lesser of two evils. Some probably thought one of them was the evil of two lessers, but that's something entirely different. But I think that is exactly what happens. And so you're as good as the snapshot you take in time, and the pollster hopefully can tell you some of the possible pathways the election may take, depending on, in this case, if Sliwa went down, Cuomo goes up and the margin gets closer.
And Barb, the other thing is this huge turnout. And this is not just here. This is all over the country. We saw this wave of turnout. Biggest election since turnout in New York City since Lindsay, I think, in the 60s.
1969.
Right.
1969.
And then a huge turnout in New Jersey as well. I actually haven't seen turnout numbers in Virginia, although I think they were very large. What does that tell us about? People expect us to be able to tell them, well, who's going to show up to vote, and here's how they're going to vote. We may be able to predict who they're going to vote for because they tell us, but picking who's going to show up, this huge wave seems to underline one of the important parts of polling as well, which is you can't know who's going to show up. You can make some educated guesses, but you can't know. And if there's this huge turnout of Democrats or people who vote for Democrats, that may not be something that everybody can pick up on. Is that fair?
And also the early vote was some indication that, we're over 700,000 in the early vote. Mary, you provided some good anecdotal information when you went to vote. And sometimes anecdotal information can be very helpful. What did you see when you went to your polling place?
Much like I think many other people in New York City experiences, that the lines were long. I can't remember the last time that my polling place was as crowded as it was, and I did vote on election day. And so when I heard the turnout numbers, everyone was expecting this to be a high turnout election, but Lee and I were communicating on election night and hearing the reports of the numbers coming in, and Lee kept saying, this can't be true, because the numbers were so high at the time around 8:00, and they were real. This was record breaking, and it certainly speaks to being passionate about the election in New York City from my anecdotal standpoint.
And in New Jersey and Virginia, there was a sense of having to make a statement. And I think that we see, as Jay began to say, that the year after the presidential election is almost like a 1-year correction. So 2017, 2021, and now 2025, all kind of reacted to the recently honored incumbent. But Barbie, you're going to say something.
Oh, well, I just wanted to get back to Jay's question, which was, who's going to turn out is a tough thing for pollsters to identify and to measure, because again, it's a prediction of the future, something that polls aren't exactly designed to do. But also the point that you made, Lee, which was that it's likely that a number of the pollsters, particularly in New Jersey, and I'm looking at a couple of the polls that were kind of defining the narrative in New York City in the last couple days, which suggested that this race was tightening and that there was a possibility that Cuomo could actually overtake Mamdani. I think a couple things that we noticed in each of when we drilled down into those polls is that they were making an assumption that this was a different electorate. This was an electorate of the past. And I think one of the things that we have learned in polling and in many other areas of life is that we can't always depend upon the past to give us a good sense of the future. And I think one takeaway for pollsters is that although we often look at voters and determine likely voters by people who have voted in the past, I think it's really paramount for us as an industry to be focusing on models that help us predict who is going to be voting now, because history is not as good a guide as it has been.
All right. Hi, y'all. So at the time we're recording this, it is the Wednesday before the New York City Marathon. And I'm here today with Coach Pete Calazo from Marist University's track and field team. And I'm also here with Neil Vishwanathan, an avid runner and a former producer for the Marist Poll Hub. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
I'm good. Thank you. So to get us started, have either of you ever run a marathon before?
Yes, I've run.
How many have you run?
Too many.
Too many?
I've run. If you count ultra marathons, about 70. I don't know the exact number, but a lot. I did my first one when I was 19, and I'm a lot older than that now. To my knowledge, Neil hasn't done any.
No, I have not. My longest run is 17 miles. One day though.
Yeah, so marathons in the future for you?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about one of these days just going and just running one on my own, just to see if I can still do it.
Just casually.
Yeah.
And Tommy, you used to run too, right?
I don't run anymore. The longest I ever run was like 16 miles or so. I actually did it with me and Neil's teammates, Gabe and Pax, freshman year. Pete, I'm sure you remember. It was that long run that was like 5:50 pace or something like that.
Where was it? Was that
it was at the
Reservoir?
rails?
Oh, the rails.
Yeah, no marathons for me.
Gotcha. Well, that seems to be kind of along what the American public is also thinking. In a poll that YouGov completed back in 2021, they asked people if you have adequate time to train for it, do you think you could or could not run a marathon? And they clarified that it was 26.2 miles, and 25% said that they could, But then the majority, 59%, said that they could not. And then if you're thinking about the actual number of people in the US who have run a marathon, from a similar YouGov poll in 2018, only about 11% of people have actually run a marathon, and only 5% have run several. So Coach Pete, you're already in that top 5, so congratulations there. So do you have any advice for people that are maybe considering running a marathon?
There's a lot of advice to give. It depends on the goal. So if the goal is, there's multiple goals, whether if the goal is to finish versus to run a specific time. A big goal for competitive marathoners is what they call BQ, Boston Qualifier, because the Boston Marathon you have to qualify for. So I would say those are the two distinct camps, running to finish and running for time. So I think the advice is different. But the advice that I would give is do more than most training plans tell you to do, because a lot of the popular training plans kind of undertrain. So running 26.2 miles is hard, and training for it should be hard. You don't want to get hurt, but you do have to do an adequate amount of mileage, And I think a lot of people just aim for the shortcut and to get through it. You get a lot of that at the New York City Marathon, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just makes it that much harder and takes that much longer. It's a good experience for sure.
You mentioned not wanting to get hurt. Are there any steps that runners should take? And Neil, if you want to pop in too, anything you do to make sure that you don't get hurt, either preparing for a marathon or just running in general?
Well, I think the stat is, you're the poll person, but if you looked it up, I think it's something like 50% of runners experience at least one injury in a calendar year. So it's very difficult to avoid injury because it's a pounding sport. Running is just a series of jumps, and it puts a tremendous amount of stress on your musculoskeletal system. So how not to get hurt is, there's entire industries based on that, and books and stuff like that. It's multifactorial. Even though I just said run more, sometimes you have to run less, focusing on your biomechanics, making sure you're well-rounded in terms of strength and conditioning and flexibility, and then just increasing the training load in a smart way. So it's a very, very complex formula, and every body is different. Everybody's foot structure is different. Some people are more prone to injury because of their genetics. Like I'm high arched, which makes my foot very rigid and there's not a lot of cushion. A lot of the shock when I used to run a lot would go up my legs, and I would have a lot of injuries. So yeah, it's not that's a deceptively difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I think when you're training to compete at your best, the little things are just as important, and in some cases take up more time than just the act of running. In college, like when I'm thinking of how I can become the best athlete I can be, it's not just, running. It's a lot of prehab in the trainers, rehab in the trainers, hydration, nutrition. And that's one thing I've really noticed now that I'm not competitively running for a team. Those little things are really where I notice that I have more free time. For example, when I'm sitting in class, I'm not now always thinking about, am I drinking exactly enough water? Am I fueled for practice after? And I would say that actually took up more time when I was competitively running to run set times than the act of running itself. So I would say in staying healthy, that's just as important as the actual running part.
Neil, I totally agree with you. In high school, I was very injury prone. And once I started strength and conditioning, especially here at Marist, I was able to not get injured as much. I was able to increase the load, right? I was doing around 70 miles a week when I was on the team. In high school, I was doing high mileage, but I kept getting injured. Doing the little things, sleeping, making sure that you're drinking enough water, all those little things will help you do well.
All right. And what about the turkey trot that's coming up as well? Is that a little bit different from marathon running, would you say, Coach Pete?
Yeah, Thanksgiving Day is, I think, the biggest day of running in the United States. There's actually a turkey trot in Dutchess County that went back when I worked at the Poughkeepsie Journal. I did a lot of research on it. I think it was the third oldest turkey trot in the country. It dated back to 1908. I think the oldest one is in Buffalo, New York, and the other one is in Manchester, Connecticut. But it's really popular, right? What's Thanksgiving about? Eating a lot of food. So to prep yourself, you run to have less guilt. So, but turkey trots, and it's a secular holiday. It's not a religious holiday. So most people celebrate it, and it's very festive. So yeah, there's turkey trots. There's turkey trots everywhere. Absolutely. Last Thanksgiving, I was visiting my daughter, Natalie, who's in grad school in Pittsburgh, and it was awful wet. It was like 40 degrees and raining. And she was a competitive swimmer. She runs a little bit now, and I did a turkey trot with her out there. And they're all over the place. They're literally like every town, almost every town in America, has a turkey trot. There's thousands of them. Where are you from? Do you have a turkey trot where you're from?
I do. We have a turkey trot in Rhode Island, and we also have a pie run, which is 5 miles. So my dad and I do the 5-mile run, and then we get a little pumpkin pie at the end of it. It's very exciting. But I have data to back up your statement too. I came prepared. Most races are typically under 1,000 people, which is something that Run Sign Up found. And of course, Run Sign Up doesn't have every race ever. But they found that a majority of Thanksgiving Day races are larger than average, with 31% of all races on Thanksgiving having more than 1,000 people. And then 2.9% of these races are actually larger than 5,000 participants. But is anyone else participating in a Thanksgiving turkey trot?
I'm not. I've actually never done a turkey trot before. I feel like when I'm running, I run to win or I have a goal in mind. And my local turkey trot in Westchester, the New Rochelle Turkey Trot, actually has pro runners show up to it all the time. And the winning 5K time will usually be somewhere either in the low 14s or high 13s. So I would almost rather just go and do a workout instead at the track the morning of Thanksgiving. And the best part is that the track is completely empty. I get it to myself because everyone's at their turkey trot. So I get to go and kind of do my own thing.
I've never run a turkey trot. I wish I did when I was in shape because I know I could have ripped something really fast, especially since it's a road race. All the 5Ks I did were on a cross-country course. So I wasn't able to determine how fast I could actually run on a 5K.
Your pie run really should have been 3.14 miles, just saying. Yep. Which would be like a 5K. These guys know I tell dad jokes all the time.
I think my dad would appreciate that one too. Well, Neil and Coach Pete, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and your insight. And for anyone else that's looking to go out and run a marathon or a turkey trot, take into consideration this advice that we got today. Thank you guys so much.
It's now fun fact time, and as Jay indicated in the open, wow, this is a surprising result. Let's go to CBS 60 Minutes Vanity Fair poll conducted in 2012. Question of the national audience: if you had to pick one, which of the following traditions would you most like to do away with? Okay, hold on to your hat. Trick-or-treating on Halloween, saying bless you after someone sneezes, singing God Bless America at sporting events, or the high school prom. Boy, is that a apples, oranges, and other kinds of choices.
Yeah, I think there's some, I don't know, pomegranates in there.
Yeah, I don't know what, something. But anyway, well, here's what the surprise is, and I don't know, what this is all about, but the trick-or-treating on Halloween by close to 2-1 at 35% was the one tradition people were most willing to get rid of, followed by bless you after someone sneezes and the high school prom at 18, and singing God Bless America at sporting events at 11. I'm not surprised that's the one people want to hold on to the most. That's obviously a song that rivals the national anthem in terms of people's interest. But any ideas, folks, why this is so surprising? I mean, what is wrong with Americans that trick-or-treating on Halloween is what you want to ditch?
Do away with. Yeah. Yeah, I would not have guessed that. And if I had to choose, I mean, you didn't point out too, Lee, that 16% of Americans volunteered that they didn't want to do away with any of these. And I kind of agreed. Although the one that probably irks me the most would be the bless you after someone sneezes, because I'm not quite sure what the origin is. I think it had to do with the fact that sneezes always indicated some kind of illness. So there was worry there. But I always felt that people who sneezed should say, excuse me, rather than someone have to kind of say something to them. But maybe I'm a little odd that way.
So I agree that I wouldn't do away with any of them. But given the proximity to Halloween and it being so cold on Halloween and so windy and traipsing around the neighborhood with a couple of 4-year-olds who didn't really respect not running out into the street and going around all the crowds. I mean, given the proximity, I would say, yeah, I can hold off until next year. I can go another 12 months without Halloween. But I would agree with you, Barb. I think bless you after a sneeze is a little antiquated. And I think that there are some other ways that we can sort of respond to that, although it does teach politeness. So.
Yes. The poll was incidentally conducted during July, so it wasn't done near trick-or-treating for Halloween.
I don't get it.
Yeah. AJ, do you have any light to shed on this?
I would just echo what Barb said about bless you. I think it's a little bit dated maybe. Out of the options, I would definitely get rid of that. I think it's just like there's no clear understanding of like why we are saying that, so it can go.
Yeah. So who came up with these as the 4 options? That's what I want to know.
Well, CBS.
I know there are
It's
favorites.
that Vanity Fair crowd, you know.
Yeah.
They stay up too late. They obviously, you know, are
They have an
being
open bar
served.
night. Yeah,
I
I think
was
they have
just
an
about
open
saying,
bar night where they come up
being
with
served a little too much.
Yeah. So I just was I mean, how can anybody put how could trick or treat be the most? I don't understand that. And Mary, I guess I understand if you're a parent dragging around 4-year-olds in the rain. Yeah, okay, I guess I.
But
get that.
I still wouldn't get away. I still wouldn't do away with it. You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see why we would need to get rid of any of them. I hadn't really thought about the sneezing bit. We always said Gesundheit, but that's bless you in German. So
Right.
I think they have some really interesting, in the past, they had a lot of really interesting, fun questions that they asked and crazy answers. In this one, I think we were grading earlier, I would give the team at Vanity Fair, CBS News, and 60 Minutes, maybe a C- on this poll.
I was going to do
I don't like the poll.
Yes, I agree. We're the same on that. I will say in closing that normally I would not necessarily say the bless you after someone sneezes. I don't think that's all that riveting, except I have very fond memories of my grandmother providing a very long Yiddish expression equivalent of blessing you, which I have good memories of. And although
You're going to tell us what it is?
Gesundheit Gedehr Gesund, which means a lot of things, including have a good, healthy year. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And it usually would, if you're going to sneeze multiple times, as some people do, you could just keep running this as a cycle. But anyway, that's why it's a fun fact, folks. So we'll see you next week.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes AJ Gambino, Tommy Rogers,
Cassie Connors, Sylvia Weiser, and Molly Goodger.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal accessible from our website.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.